Hello and welcome to another guide on Mass Effect 3 multiplayer from Rogden Gaming. Before we go about discussing each of the individual maps and their characteristics, I wanted to discuss a few things that are true for all types of maps. First, nearly any location on the map can serve as a spawn point for enemies to enter. Second, enemies have a tendency to spawn at least 2 spawn points away from you or other players. And finally, with a few exceptions, enemies will not spawn within the same spawn point that you or other characters are standing. In gameplay terms, what this means is that if one player is standing far away from the other players, he will encourage spawn points that would not normally occur, such as in Firebase Dagger, where Krogan may be attempting to melee the spawn point that occurs in this area, will instead cause enemies to spawn behind the sniper cages. Starting with Firebase Dagger, I'll do a quick run around the map, stopping at all of the ammo locations. Afterwards, I will then note unusual spawning locations, as well as strategies for beating this map. I mentioned that there were a few exceptions to enemies spawning within the same area that your characters are standing. This particular zone happens to be one of them. If your characters are set up next to this window in sniping positions, enemies can spawn in around the backside of this pillar. For this reason, if you are playing with random allies, you'll want to periodically check in these locations to make sure that enemies are not spawning in. If you are set up at the following window, you can see most of the areas where enemies will spawn in by. An effective strategy for this map is to have one person at each of these windows, someone guarding this hallway, and someone else positioned in this area here, making sure that no enemies come from this direction, as well as this tunnel. Alternatively, your team could instead set up here, so that you can guard this walkway, as well as this tunnel, as well as place drones and proximity mines in this area here, and have someone guard this entrance. Firebase Ghost is odd in that the starting location is not a good place for your characters to bunker down. If you are with a random group of players, I recommend this location, or this location here, to protect yourself from oncoming enemies. However, if you are attempting to beat this with a team of players that you know, I recommend making your stand in this particular building here, as it provides 3 easy routes of escaping and close ammo caches nearby. Firebase Giant is another map where the starter position is not the optimal location where you'll want to start each wave. Instead, it is up this ramp. I recommend this particular map if you are trying to beat gold, as the enemy has a tendency to spawn at the very far end of this area. The other two locations that they tend to spawn are from either one of these hallways. There are enough locations for all of your party mates to stand and receive ample cover. The best location to set up for Firebase Reactor is against this wall here, as you can shoot enemies that are coming down this corridor and enemies that spawn in from this particular area here, as well as enemies that come down this ramp. The danger of using this location is that enemies also have a tendency to spawn in this area behind you, so make sure that someone is guarding this location. Firebase Glacier is the most cramped map available for play. And the starting location, if you are playing with a random group of players, is best at this particular pillar. As you can see, every area where the enemies can spawn.
Understood.
Alternatively, you can start each wave in this location. To maximize your grab medals. There are a couple unusual spawning locations in this map. The first is that this particular corridor can serve as a spawning location, and counts as 2 spawning locations away from players that are camped out in this area. This means that in order to prevent enemies from spawning in that location and blindsiding the other players, someone must remain in this room. The second is on the extraction platform, and that enemies can spawn in even if you are already standing in this location.
Strategically significant target has been located.
There are 2 exceptions to enemies spawning in the same location that you are standing in this map. The first of these is the starter platform. Enemies can spawn. Additionally, enemies can spawn up here. The Banshee and the Phantom can also jump up or teleport to this location, making it significantly more difficult to track them in this map. Consequently, enemies are unable to spawn underneath of this area and cannot spawn behind. The location where players typically make their stand is on this platform here, as the majority of enemies will spawn from this location. However, enemies can also spawn from the starter platform, as well as from this hallway. If you are with a random set of players, make sure that you are constantly checking those locations to make sure that you are not caught unaware. This completes our guide on the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer maps. This is Commander Ogden. Thanks for watching.